let's talk about posing in Blender, specifically when you're a Daz Studio user and you sort of know your way around how to do poses on characters in Daz Studio. Why does it not really work in Blender all that well, and why is it so bloody complicated? So let's have a look at that. I'm going to go and load one of 3 characters that I'm going to show you, and I'll talk a little bit more about the whole process here. This is Rain from the Sprite Fright movie, and I've snagged this character from the Blender Studio, and I'm using her as a demo because this character comes with a magical control rig, and those are these points that we see here. I'll talk a little bit more about that and show you why that is important. The second character is going to be Claire Redfield from Resident Evil for my friend Nick, my kind supporter who makes this video possible, by the way. And the third one is Leon, also from Resident Evil. He was an FBX, so FBXs traditionally don't have a control rig built in, or can't actually save a control rig. So those are 3 very different situations, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how do you handle these use cases. So first of all, control rig, what is it? Why is it important? Why do we even need it? If you come from something like Daz Studio or iClone or Poser, then you're sort of used to the fact that I have a Genesis 9 figure here, and I'll take her foot. I'm going to go and left click and drag the foot up, and everything just works. And likewise, I can do this with all kinds of tools here. I can use my little ball up here in the left-hand corner, or I can use the IK functionality and just go and move my figure around as I want, or I can dial in poses. Why is this so difficult in Blender? Because, you know, that functionality doesn't exist. Well, it's because what I'm doing here when I select any of these nodes on the figure, I'm really selecting the nodes, the control nodes on a control rig. It in turn then goes and drives, the skeleton, which is set up in a way that it looks at sections, surface sections, selection sets on the static mesh, which then describe how much it's allowed to move. So for this magic to become possible, we have these 3 components. We have a static mesh that doesn't move. That's hard, rock hard static that doesn't move. Then we have a skeleton, which is the thing that's made up of bones, and each bone is associated with a surface group, a face group, a vertex group on the mesh, and it's associated with a weight that dictates how far is the mesh now going to be able to move as I move the bone. And then the third thing is this magical control rig thing. So the bone itself is not something I can select. As you can see in Daz Studio, I have to switch to a specific tool up here, namely the joint editor tool, to actually see the bones. And when I do select them, I can make adjustments to the bone properties themselves, but I can't really move the figure around. For that, I need to come out of this mode and then go and select the node, the same node or a similar node, and then make a move. And so what really happens here is that my control rig, which is sort of hidden from the user, and it just works as if by magic, my control rig now goes and tells the bone how far to move, and the bone then tells the mesh how far to move that part of the mesh. That's the magic behind it. So what makes this easy in Daz Studio and in iClone is that they have standardized figures and they have all that functionality built in. But if you have something that comes in from Blender, if you've got something from Unreal Engine or another application, these control rigs are actually separate properties that need to be created and set up on a per character basis. There are, as far as I know, not many reusable control rigs. I mean, you have one for the Unreal Engine mannequin. If you think about it, you should be able to use that on every Unreal Engine compatible skeleton, but in reality, that isn't quite the case. Also, these control rigs are built with user functionality in mind. So one animator might need something that the other one doesn't. So you either overload things and make everything available, and that's too much, or you provide too little. So therefore, if you make these things from scratch, if you create these things from scratch, you can build all the functionality you need for your situation, but it's difficult to find something that is generic. So then specifically in Blender and with Rain here, in order to pose her around like I've just shown you in Daz Studio, we need to be in this pose mode up here. And pose mode is something you can only go into if you have the armature of your figure selected. So if I go and select her body or her shirt here, for example, let me go out of pose mode here and just select her shirt, you'll notice that I can't even go into pose mode. So when you load the figure in, or when you open the file immediately, then you might not be in pose mode. Everything might be selected. You have to go and select the particular armature here, which in this case is the control rig, or you can go into the scene collection and select it from here, and then pose mode will show up. So that's number one, very important. Then it is just like I've shown you in Daz Studio, that when you go and select one of these controls, like the foot control here, then it goes and highlights, and then I can go and move this around. And because this is a very good rig, I can go and actually make it work the way I need it to. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. And I'm using the shortcut keys here, but of course you can use anything you want. So my shortcut keys, they're the same as in modeling. So you select something and then you would go and say G and then move it around. If you press G followed by something like Z, then you can only move it up and down. X would be left and right, like the axis shows, or GY would be forward and back. You can do the same with R. So RZ means you're going to rotate in the Z direction, and then RX would go along the red axis, and then RY would go along the green axis. And this IK functionality here is powered by this control rig. So these are the IK end goals for the knees, and we have something similar here for the elbows. So you're not really supposed to take these and move them around. They're just used by the control rig that is calculating this magic under the hood. If you're not familiar with the shortcut keys, or you don't want to use them, or you can't quite fathom how they work, I strongly recommend you learn them, because it'll help you in all aspects and all areas of Blender time and time again. But for the interim, you also have these controls here. So this one would be translate. You can go and use these arrows here. That's for translate, or you have the same one for rotate. And you, of course, you also have the one that is combined, which is this one. But I tell you, it's for me, it really isn't all that fun or convenient to make adjustments. The one thing that is good about it, if you use these things, is, so I don't like it because there's so much clutter in the viewport already, and I'll show you in a moment how to get rid of that. One thing that I would strongly recommend, if you do make, like, if we give her something like a sitting position like this, I would probably be a little bit faster if I didn't use my visual control keys here. But it is doable, of course. So use whatever works for you. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, if I go and bring her into a sitting position, what I strongly recommend, if you use the shortcut keys, go into the orthographic viewports. So you can, the good thing about this gizmo is that it will change as you move your viewport. If I do the same thing here and I didn't have these, I don't think I'd want to go and press R now, because I don't know which direction the hand rotates. So I would go and say Control 3 on my numpad. So I look at the character from this side, and then I would go and say G to bring that hand down, and then 1 from the front, G to bring the hand to the side, and then Control 3 again for here, and then I'll go and rotate the hand around, and then I'll go and press 1 again, and then I'll go and say RZ, then the hand comes, hand comes over here, and then I might make some more adjustments, like like this, and then I'll go and put the hand on her hip. So that was actually easier for me to do this than it would have been with one of these controls. So one reason why I don't like using these is because there's so much clutter in the viewport, and you've noticed this as well. If you have control rigs that aren't as sparse as this one, you may have to go over and click this icon, which disables the overlays altogether. So that gets rid of most of it. And if you want to see your other objects in the scene, you can also go and just open that drop-down menu and just disable the bones. So that'll leave everything else in there, like the grid. It'll just make the bones invisible. So what I sometimes have to do on rigs that are much more cluttered than this, I would have to go and say the face here. Face works the same way. You go and grab onto one of those eyebrows here, and if there's too much stuff, you can just go and, once you've selected it, disable all the overlays, and then just go and move the eyebrows, rotate them around, and then go and select this one. This is probably also is that selecting it? No, so you have to go and switch it on in order to make that selection, and then you go and move that around. There's a little bit of surprised look there. So yeah, that is sometimes what I have to do. As I said, this rig is pretty cool because it uses only the controls that you might need. So a lot of the functionality that is in this character we don't see, we're not exposed to it because it's hidden, and that is for our benefit so that we can see more of the character. But that's how you pose in principle. And the cool thing about this now is that you can also go and save this as a pose asset if you want. So first of all, if you, whatever you select, let's say the hand here, if I select that, there's a way to reset it to before I posed it, and that happens over here under pose, clear transform. So all doesn't mean reset everything, it just only resets the selected control point here, but all means location, rotation, and scale. So if I do that, then the hand goes and moves back, so it's resetting it to its original position. If you wanted to go and I'll undo that with Control Z. If you wanted to do that to the whole character, you can go and select everything with the A key, and then you go pose, clear transform all, and then the character goes into that position again. Now, only because this is the control rig that the Blender guys provide, they provide something else. They provide additional functionality. If you select this little man icon here, which is the data icon, I guess, you've got your control rig exposed as bone collections. So you can go and hide and show certain things. So if you don't want to see the IK controls, just go make them invisible, and then more disappear. So that'll help you get clarity while you're posing characters. But again, it takes a ton of time to set this up. If you don't want to see the face controls here, for example, just hide those, and then you see what your character looks like. If you don't currently pose the face, you just hide those. But this is functionality you have to build in order for that to be available. It's not available in every control rig. One other thing that they've done here is this pose position and rest position. So you can go and switch between them. This is the pose you've dialed in, and this is the rest position. So it could be T pose, could be an A pose. The one last thing I want to talk about, what happens, how do you save your poses? And that is something that is a built-in functionality in Blender that is called the pose library. And that used to be something when you press N to open the side panel here and go to animation. In Blender versions 4.1 and below, you had the actual pose library in here, but they've turned it into something that is now accessible through the asset shelf. And as such, we can toggle the asset shelf open. I'll do that in a second. In order to use it, we need a timeline. And the timeline in the normal general layout is open by default. I've closed it because, reasons. So if yours is closed and you don't have a timeline here, just right click somewhere until this double arrow comes up, and then you say horizontal split, and then you go and make yourself a timeline. This is a second, not viewport, but a second tab here. And this icon here, let's switch that over to the timeline, regular timeline here. And then we have that. And the timeline has its own little shelf down here. So with the N panel, you can open that up with the N key, and then you go and say create a pose asset. Ding, and everything that was selected will be saved as a pose. So in Daz Studio, if you save a pose, usually everything is included unless you select things off. And here in Blender, you have to select all the things that you want the pose to save. So if I only had selected the hands and then create a pose from it, then it would only save the hands in that pose. But as you can see here, I've had everything selected, and as such, everything gets saved in my pose. So that hasn't actually saved the pose, that's just created a keyframe on the timeline. And from here, I can now go and create a reusable pose. And that's where I'm going to use that asset shelf here. So that's on this end panel in the viewport under animation, toggle asset shelf. And then this opens up. And then I should really see something and create pose asset. There we go, create that. I should come up with a little thumbnail. At least that's what happened last time. Okay, so something isn't quite working. I hope in your version of Blender it's working better, but in my version it isn't. So if I go and this should be in rehearsal, I've seen little thumbnails here. So sorry about that, doesn't happen. I'm going to go and select all the control points here, and then I'll head over to pose clear all, so that we don't have a pose dialed in anymore. And now I can go and double click the thing that should show me a thumbnail. If I double click that, then my pose is back. So yeah, that is how you do that. You can, by default, I think it saves it in this blend file. You can also add sort of central pose library files here under the edit preferences, and then there's file paths. This is where you can define your own asset libraries to reuse them. So that's Rain, and let's go and have a look at a different character that doesn't have such a good control rig and how you would deal with that. So first of all, I'm going to go and just open one up. I'm going to not save this. I'm going to go up here and go Jill with face rig. I'm going to put links into the description if you want to follow along with this. I'm just going to hit open and show you what happens. Blender has a habit to save any UI customizations you've made, as well as shortcut customizations you've made, to the actual blend file. Now, this character here came as a blend file, and as such, all these things are in fact saved with it, and they're saved in a way that I might not exactly understand it. Sometimes it's really nice. If we go back to my Rain character here, open recent Rain. If I just open that up, you can see that I've got a timeline. I've also got a little text field here, and I've got my bone collections at the bottom here. But this is not how I would set up my interface. Usually mine looks like that: file, new, general. This is what mine looks like. So it's just the cube missing, and there's no timeline here. But if you open a file, then it brings in its own UI, and that can be devastating, because some people prefer to select things with the right click, and you think, oh, my mouse doesn't work anymore, I got to go to hardware store and buy a new one. Don't do that. There is a way to open this and leave your own interface intact. Let me go and show you that. So I'm going to go to open, and then I'll go back to Jill with the face rig, select her, and then here, this little gear icon, if I select that, I can untick load UI, and then it goes and leaves my UI intact, but loads the data of the new file. And I much prefer that. I gotta say, I've been burnt many times before, so now you know as well. This scene, by the way, comes not only with the character, but also with a bit of a lighting setup. And because this is about posing, I can barely see what's going on here. I'm going to go and delete all of that. This and the lights. And then I'll go and also delete the camera, because we're going to talk about that in our next video. And then we'll see that this is now my character. So it looks very different. But the good news is it also has a control rig. It's just not a very good control rig, but nevertheless, it is a control rig, which is already miles better than if it didn't have a control rig, like we'll see in our next example. So this is set up in a way that the character doesn't appear to be colored in. That can be annoying. You can do that yourself if you want to do that. That is on the Surfaces tab, of course. And then at the very bottom, let me just go take my face away. There is something, if we ignore all that, there's viewport display. And there's a way that you can just color in objects with just, simplified color. So in my case, maybe these are the trousers, and maybe this is here. This is the skin. So let me go and make that a little pink, so it looks a bit like a person. And perhaps the boots are sort of, I don't know, brown maybe, or maybe red or something like that. So that's, maybe there's our leather boots here. And then the tank top is probably white. That's okay. And then we could probably go and color in the face also in the same head. I only remembered what the color value was. Let's go and select this, and then go and pick the hex value here, copy that out, and put the same value on the face, and then at least those look the same. And then perhaps she has, I don't know, darkish sort of hair. So that looks a little bit better than it did before. So if your file doesn't show this, then that's where you can do that. So on the materials tab in the viewport display, it just helps. We probably want to pose not in a fully fledged rendered view. I will talk about that in the next video, by the way. So how do we pose something like this? So first of all, you can go and switch all the overlays off and back on again. And you can go and switch the bones off and on again. And how do we pose something like that? This doesn't have inverse kinematics enabled. So first of all, we're going to select the armature here, or any of these little sticks sticking out here, and then we'll head over into pose mode once again. And then you'll see some of these colors already change, so that indicates usually groups. And under the hood, each of these things is actually a separate custom object that replaces a bone, and you can hide bones and show bones. We'll talk about that in a second. So because we don't have inverse kinematics here, you have to go and select. If I wanted to have her bend forward, I'd have to go and select one of these bones. I'll go to the orthographic view and then just go and rotate each of these bones as I see fit around. So that is how you'd pose a character like that. So it's a little bit tricky. And to answer your next question, hey, I have a pose for something like from Mixamo or from Daz Studio. Isn't there a way? Can't I just go and translate that? And the correct answer is not really. I mean, you can, of course, do some retargeting to a certain extent, but it's tricky. And for poses, I don't know if there's a way, to be brutally honest. So you have to go and pose your figures from scratch. Unless somebody else knows how to properly retarget stuff just for still poses, I don't know how to do that. I mean, Blender certainly has that option. I do know that. But how it works, I don't know, because I don't use Blender for posing. I bring in animations every once in a while, but they're usually made for the character that I'm working on. So once again, if we wanted to put her into a sitting position here, let's go and try to find the leg bone and then rotate that up, rotate this down. So there's no IK. So if I go and grab my foot here and then go do this, it doesn't drive any of the bones, because IK is a little tricky to set up. If you want to do that, if you say, hey, I think I could do better, I need a better rig for this, look into something called Rigify, and that is a plugin that ships with Blender that lets you infer a rig if your character is a humanoid biped. I think it does other things as well these days, but it's something that can get you started on a relatively good rig with IK. So that's something nice to keep in mind. If you do have something that is unrigged, like an OBJ or something, then that's probably where you're gonna find a bit of joy. But again, it's a little tricky to use. I've never got my head around it. So maybe you have better luck than I have. See that this, I didn't see the hand because there's so much stuff on the overlay. So this is, I think, still a little, is this the hand? This could be the hand. Nope, that was just a finger. That's another thing. If you can't make out what the hell is the hand here, select it directly from the scene outliner. So you could look for hand and see if anything comes up. I don't think it does. What a shame. Yeah, it's a shame. So it's one of those rigs that where you think, yeah, there's a lot of additional stuff that we could do with, but it just doesn't provide that. I mean, look at that here. You've got the facial rig as well. You've got this thing with the eyes. I didn't actually explain that in the previous one. This is an eye target, so the eyes always look at this. So if you go and move this, you will see that the eyes, let me just go and hide that here. If I go and say GX, then the eye target moves, and that means the eyes move along wherever she's looking. So that, in conjunction with the head rotation, you can position where the eyes are looking. So if I go and select this and say RZ, head moves over there, maybe this one as well, RZ. And then maybe on top of that, she wants to sort of look into that direction. I can go and say G and move that here. And if the overlay wouldn't be just so much, you could actually see her eyes looking that way. So yes, that was this rig. You can see the weights aren't great. So if she's sitting, this would have to be corrected really with proper weights. But hey, at least it's a control rig. Let me show you something that does not have a control rig at all with the Leon character. So if you think this was problematic, then wait until you see something that came in as an FBX. Leon didn't quite come in with proper textures. Most of it was sort of invisible, but you know, some of the colors here have come through, so it's sort of working. Hair comes through the hat, so we don't really worry about that. So if I go and switch on his armature and go into pose mode and then go and switch on the overlay, we see something like this. That is problematic, but it's Blender's way of saying, hey, there is no control rig, but I know there are bones here. And I'm sort of thinking you puny user probably want to maybe be able to do something with them. And so I've taken the liberty and used this sort of generic bone shape for you. And I don't really know how big or small they need to be, so they point in all kinds of directions, and especially the face is hilarious. But you can technically, if you knew what was what, literally select one of these, make this invisible, and then go and move this around. So this is the tip of the nose here. Okay, that's good to know. Let's see if we can pick something else here. We've got another one that's also the nose here. What does that do? G. That doesn't really do much. So this isn't a user error. This is just something that Blender detected bones, and you have to sort of make head or tail of it. Some bones are here, but we can't see them. So like the bones in his legs, I currently can't select them, or I can't see them, but they're still there. One way to make those visible is with this icon at the top here, which is the bones display. You can enable that, and then you basically fade away the rest of the body for the benefit, so that you can go and select this. So this, I don't know, was this a twist bone? Hard to say. Full stop on while you're hovering over the outliner will show you the item that you've got selected in the scene tab. So this is now the leg tibia twist. This is not what I want. So the good thing about this is it shows you exactly which bones they are, and you can select what you want to pick. So let's take the femur here and go rotate that around. That sort of works out. Look at that. There's also no inverse kinematics on here. So femur, then there's the tibia. The tibia goes down. Right, then he would be in a sitting position. We don't want to usually touch any of the twist bones. They are only there for, they're not there for posing. So usually those types of bones you would hide, and you can do that as well. I don't want to overload you here. And then this is the ankle. That would do this, and then you've got the leg ball here. So the foot ball here. So that's neat, and then you can go and do the same on the other side. So this is, once again, this is the femur, and you rotate that and turn him into a sitting position here. So tibia goes down, and yeah, that's how you would pose Leon. In the next episode that I'm also making for Nick, I'll show you how to render some of these things out with the pose, and talk a little bit about lighting, how you actually get a render out of Blender, because that's also shrouded pretty much in mystery. So while this was certainly not a complete introduction to posing, I'm hoping that you got a bit of an idea of why this is so different and also difficult compared to other applications, and also why we need that control rig object so much. Look into Rigify. If I do find any better resources, I'm going to leave them as links in the description here. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I hope I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.